It's so beautiful, cinema. Cinema can go deep or it can go shallow. And I think the great films tell a story, a surface story, but the great cinema goes deep into the psyche, and these undercurrents are caught on deeper levels.
Born in Missoula, Montana on January 20th, 1946, David Lynch was a contrarian from an early age. Finding school to be what he called a crime against young people, Lynch languished in his studies, and despite joining the Boy Scouts so he could, as he put it, quit and put it behind him, Lynch ascended to the rank of Eagle Scout. Lynch's father moved around for work, and subsequently David got to travel and see more of America than his peers, and it only instilled in him a restlessness and helped him develop his keen eye for the beautiful underpinnings of a banal suburban life. Lynch had an aptitude for art from a young age, and rather than focus on scholastics, he decided he wanted to pursue art and study painting in college, enrolling in the Corcoran School of the Arts and Design in Washington, D.C. He transferred to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and he subsequently dropped out altogether within the span of a year or so. Lynch's habit of making it up as he went along was evident at this point, because his next move was to travel to Austria to study for 3 years with Austrian expressionist painter Oskar Kokoschka. The problem was, he didn't bother to check with Kokoschka first, so when he arrived in Salzburg, Kokoschka was unavailable to teach him. Cutting his 3-year study abroad stint short, he returned to America to plan his next move. He enrolled in art school again, this time in Philadelphia. He married his first wife, he had a job, and he moved into a crime-ridden part of Philadelphia. To make ends meet, Lynch took odd jobs printing engravings, and he found the work so tedious that he was inspired to make a short film about paintings that came to life, a project that was ultimately scrapped. Stuck with the film equipment, Lynch decided to pursue a different project on his own, and after cutting his teeth on short films and winning an American Film Institute grant, Lynch moved to Los Angeles in 1971 to attend the AFI Film Conservatory, where he got his first taste of studio meddling. The faculty at the conservatory proposed drastic changes to the film project he was working on. Abandoning the project and trying something else that he could make free from interference, Lynch conceived of Eraserhead, his first feature. The fear and apprehension he experienced as a reluctant new father in a dangerous neighborhood in Philadelphia are all evident in Eraserhead. And while critics savaged the film, it became a favorite on the cult film circuit, and it got the attention of Stuart Cornfield, a Hollywood EP who frequently worked with Mel Brooks. Preferring to shoot someone else's script for his next film, Lynch shot a script based on the life of John Merrick, who was called The Elephant Man. Elephant Man was a critical success and earned 8 Academy Award nominations, and it also catapulted Lynch to Hollywood darling status, and Lynch was free to be selective about his next project. In fact, he was so selective, he turned down the opportunity to direct Return of the Jedi, preferring to attempt to adapt Frank Herbert's magnum opus called Dune. Dune was confusing, dense, and too long, and studios made numerous cuts over the years to attempt to find something audiences would find palatable. The film ultimately failed to make back even half of its $45 million budget, and Lynch found himself contractually obligated to make 2 more films for the studio, and they were not interested in his planned next project, a sequel to Dune. Instead, he conceived of Blue Velvet, one of his finest films, and Lynch earned himself his 2nd Academy Award nomination for Best Director. Working on obscure television projects for years, Lynch mounted a very strong comeback in 1990, where he not only released Wild at Heart, a frenetic Nicolas Cage vehicle, he also launched his signature television series, Twin Peaks. Both projects were a success, and though Lynch was happy with how Peaks began, meddling from the network compromised his vision, and he was forced to make substantial concessions regarding the narrative. He left the project midway through the show's 2nd and final season, though he made a prequel of sorts called Fire Walk With Me, which he released as a feature film in 1992. Lynch didn't make another feature for 5 years, coming back hard with 1997's Lost Highway, which confused but delighted critics, though it made back less than a fifth of its budget. Everyone, even Lynch, was baffled by the project he says he fell in love with next. A biopic about a man who rode his lawnmower across country called The Straight Story, which Lynch adapted into a G-rated film for Disney. It didn't feel the least bit like a Lynch project, but it gave him the gravitas to develop a TV project called Mulholland Drive, which became a film feature of the same name in 2001. Mulholland Drive was as baffling to American audiences as was Lost Highway. but the rest of the world was kinder, and Mulholland Drive made significant money overseas. Preferring to film projects for his own website, Lynch held off on making another feature until 2006's Inland Empire, easily his most polarizing film. Lynch hasn't made another feature to date, although in 2014 he rebooted Twin Peaks for another season, much to the delight of audiences, and he has steadily produced a stream of web content, including his current project, a daily weather report from his apartment in Los Angeles. Whatever's next for Lynch, audiences are hungry for his unique vision, his dreamlike visuals, and his surreal blending of music and lighting to create a thoroughly unsettling, but ultimately enriching experience.
A man of many hats, a director, a writer, a musician and artist, a transcendental meditation speaker and advocate, even a weatherman. So grab your man-made dancing chickens and a darn good cup of coffee, because we are talking about David Lynch tonight on the new episode of Film Hooligans. I'm John, the host, and as always, I'm joined once again by Mr. Jason Alt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is an episode that's been a long time coming. It deserved a lot of research. Does all of his films have a cult following? But I think the person himself has a cult following. People want to know about him. People want to know about his style. And sometimes he wants to talk about it. Sometimes he just gives a simple no. Let's jump right into our drinks tonight. We have some themed drinks. I'll let you kick it off.
I got two David Lynch cocktails that I kind of ad hoc, especially for this episode. The first one here I'm calling the Blue Velvet. Let me think. 2 parts boozy lemonade, 1 part vodka, 2 parts. I didn't have blue curacao, but I substituted Faygo Blue Moon Mist, which is sort of like a blue Mountain Dew. Baja Blast might work. I don't know.
The Juggalos will be happy.
Yeah, whoop whoop. How do magnets work? They work pretty well, just like this drink works as a cocktail. And the second thing I have is I'm calling it the LARA Palmer. It's
Nice.
Not quite an Arnold Palmer. It's 2 parts boozy lemonade, 2 parts boozy iced tea, shot of vodka, and a boozy cherry. And I tied the stem in a knot with my tongue.
Oh,
in honor of Twin Peaks. So let's do it.
someone get Sherilyn Fenn on the line, because I bet she would attempt to make out with you. I'm going to start us off tonight with a darn good cup of coffee or an Allegiant split shot. This is my favorite espresso milk stout. This big beast of a Breakside. This is from Portland, Oregon. This is their 10-year anniversary collab, and every year they've, for 10 years, they've collabed with a different ale house, and this year they did with Pint House in Austin, Texas. It is called Dream Pop. So like David Lynch's films, it's like a dream. So we're going to down those 2 bad boys. I don't have a cocktail, but I'm holding down the beer for it tonight. So, L'chaim.
Prost.
Let's start it off sweet. I wanted to kick this episode off by asking you, Jason, the age-old question, a question that David Lynch himself has dodged from interviewers, and his doctor said that he shouldn't even try to really understand it himself for health reasons. What does the term that's so synonymous with this director, Lynchian, mean to you?
So I think what separates a lot of Lynchian weirdness from non-Lynchian weirdness is the fact that it seems to be that dream logic where he likes to use people speaking backwards or just saying weird stuff like you'd experience a dream. Stephen King is a writer who says he uses his dreams for inspiration a lot because there's something a little bit off about them, but it's unsettling and you're not sure what. So he doesn't really have to be that creative. He's like, how do I freak people out? He's just sort of, I'm doing avant-garde shit, and it's sort of influenced by dreams I've had. So it feels a little bit off, but you're not sure why. That's his signature more than anything he does visually or with sound design or any of his camera techniques. I think the fact that he does dreams so much better than anybody else is what feels Lynchian to me.
There's 2 levels of Lynch, and one of them is in all of his films, there are at least moments that are super Lynchian, which is like a fugue state, like a dreamlike state. Even something as straightforward as The Straight Story you know, the premise is quite Lynchian on face value, even though you could stream it on Disney Plus and it's rated G. But there's a moment in that film even where there's like a lady that like hits a deer off camera in your rated G, you know, Disney film, and then she just goes off on this like mink stole level like tirade, something that you would like find in a John Waters film.
No one can help me. I've tried driving with my lights on. I've tried sounding my horn. I scream out the window. I roll the window down and bang on the side of the door and play Public Enemy real loud. He's dead. And I love deer.
But it's so out of place with the rest of the film. It's just like, like he still has to put his own stank on it. You know, like long moments of pause and introspection that is captured on screen. But it's also the quirky dialogue sometimes. When you have a dream and you're talking to someone in your dream, it's not always just like you and I are talking now. There's just like, you know, you and I could be talking about hot dogs and then an elephant could walk in the background.
You like hot dogs, right?
And that's kind of not just how he films everything or how he kind of maps it out, but also the editing as well. You know, the multiple layers of things. I feel like there's kind of two levels where he does tend to be more of a straightforward filmmaker at times, you know, a little bit more fast paced, like a Dune or a Straight Story, but also he gets really introspective, like an Inland Empire, where he goes super surrealist. I think that's where the Lynchian really kind of bleeds out.
I think the fact that he is capable of being handed something like The Straight Story and doing a straight job with it.
Right.
You know, he handed a film to Disney and be like, yeah, David Lynch just made your boring lawnmower movie. You're welcome. It's like asking Banksy to do like a picture of Bart Simpson for your kid. He's like, all right. I won't say I'm better than this project, but I am Banksy. And then he's like, yeah, it's Bart Simpson. It looks just like Matt Groening would draw him. We did it.
Those more traditional storytelling moments, like I said, he starts off like most of his films with this like slow establishing crane shot, or you see it in the beginning of like Blue Velvet, where you get to the picket fence, and yeah, he's kind of like beating you over the head with the symbolism, where you start at the picket fence and like the fire truck kind of like, you know, driving through the nice suburban neighborhood, waving at all the neighbors and stuff, and then you pan down and it's like, bugs and carrion and it's all evil, you know, this dark underbelly. But he even did that in like The Straight Story, where you just get like fixated on this like overweight woman eating snacks, and then it like follows her all the way down to that creepy Mulholland Drive-esque like pan to around the corner. You're waiting for something to jump out, and it doesn't because it's a rated G film. But he still inserts his style into even the most straightforward of stories.
So if somebody knew nothing at all about David Lynch or any of his work, and you had 90 seconds to tell them what Lynchian was,
yeah,
I think if you watched the beginning 90-second credit sequence to Twin Peaks, that'll tell you 90% of what you need to know about David Lynch. You're like, what is this show about? Why is it so placid and everything's like calm? And I feel like I can hear the saw grinding in the background, but not really. That's just ambient sound he's using.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I've learned nothing about the show, but I'm into it. Like, do you remember the first time you sat down and saw the opening credits to Twin Peaks and you're like, what the hell even is this? I don't know anything.
Right.
You didn't see a picture of anybody. You didn't see any actors' names you recognize necessarily. So it's just, I don't know. I feel like that prepares you for seeing Lynch. I would think, like, if you're sort of like, okay, this is the aesthetic, I'm on board now. I think once you can get established with that, I think you're ready, you know?
I think it's totally fair for the people that aren't ready also. Like, I don't really recommend David Lynch films to anybody because I just don't want to hear it, because I get it. Like, I have a friend that's just like, you know, I wouldn't shut up about Twin Peaks, and then he's like, fine, I'll watch the fucking show. And then he's just like, I really gave it 3 episodes, and I don't get it. I don't like it. It's not for me. I can't believe you gave it 3. Like, way to stick in there. Because
Yeah, if you didn't like the first episode of Twin Peaks, I can't imagine choking down a second
yeah.
one.
Jill. Outside. Outside. Always a pleasure.
Your buddy's a trooper.
Or the
I think-
credits, as you said, right?
Yeah.
If you're not on board, you're not on board.
But I think it's like anything. I think if you were there at the time, and I was like 8, so I wasn't.
Right.
You know, I got there late. I'd already seen all of his movies before I watched Twin Peaks. I watched Dune, and I was still like, yeah, I'm into it.
You deserve a medal for that.
I didn't have the pamphlet or nothing. If you didn't like the first episode, I don't know. It's probably his best work. I don't think you're going to argue with that.
No.
I like his movies, but like I think Twin Peaks is the first season and a half is just that's what he's about, I think.
Yeah.
So if you were there at the time, you're like, oh, I get this. I feel like this is not for everybody, but it's for me, and that felt cool, I guess.
Right.
Like they would have like really small Twin Peaks like conventions before that was even a really big thing, and everyone was like, I'm just wrapped in a plastic sheet. I'm cosplaying. You know, like that was the extent of it, but it was just such like a weird group of people that were into such like a weird thing. And then all the pretentious people, I think, came and they're like, no, you have to understand Twin Peaks. And I think, I don't know. I feel like it's almost like being held hostage. Like you've got a boyfriend that's like, you got to watch Die Hard, and they're staring at you instead of watching the movie, you know? Something like that. It's like you're being held hostage by like, did you like Twin Peaks? So I can see under those circumstances not being into it.
Twin Peaks, the evolution and de-evolution of the show tells you everything you need to know about David Lynch as a creative person, because he had something to say. He said this is about a town and the people inside the town, the small town, and how their reaction is to something that actually happens.
She's dead, wrapped in plastic.
Right? And I'm not going to get on a douchey, like, I'm going to explain to you what Twin Peaks is, because even David Lynch says, everything is correct and everything is incorrect. Everything's open to interpretation, whether it's Twin Peaks or his films, and that's, I'm not trying to tell you and map it out what it is, but
that's what's good about avant-garde art, right? Like there is no, you can just say what it made you feel and you're not wrong.
Yeah, I was really into that story, and the story wasn't about who killed Laura Palmer. It was about Laura Palmer, the prom queen, homecoming queen that had some problems, but this person was so magnetic, and we've all known this person in our life, whether it, be an ex-girlfriend or wife or a brother, sister, whatever. We've met these people that have this like pure magnetism to them. And what happens when someone takes that person out, and the relationship, the turmoil or the growth that sends the rest of the people around that person when they're gone. And the fact that the studio made him solve the crime, quote unquote, he threw his hands up. He left in the middle of season 2. He came back and he hate fucked Fire Walk with Me. Ever since then,
he took the EP credit on that. That was his first EP credit, I think.
Yeah. It starts off with it's not an accident that the film starts off with someone smashing a TV with a sledgehammer. He's, again, beats you over the head, or beats a TV over the head with his symbolism. And then even into the third season, he made Twin Peaks as a FU to the people that were making him make more. He loves the characters. He loves, in interviews, he said he's loved all his characters, whether they be the cinematic characters or in Twin Peaks. That's not the thing. He loved revisiting these stories, but the fact that he lost control, like he did with Dune, they didn't give him, final edit. Yeah. He made it in spite of the fans.
Still Twin Peaks, though.
It was but it wasn't. Fire Walk with Me was like, this is Twin Peaks, and this is what you should have been focusing on when everyone wanted to know what happened to Cooper in the Black Lodge. And he's like, no, you're going to go spend, a day in the life with the person that this is supposed to be about. And, this is kind of like your slap on the hand. And then when people still were pissed off because we still didn't get any, air quotes answers, that's when he just made, what was it, 18 hours of just middle fingers left and right, subverting the expectations of the audience just because they wanted a thing and he wouldn't give it to them. And it was perfect. And I understand why people hated the third season.
I'm seeing parallels with Dan Harmon.
Oh yeah.
Where he just like got fired from Community and then came back and just hate fucked everybody with the end of Community. And now he's spent a whole half a season of Rick and Morty just shitting on the people that are pretentious about how much they like Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Or Stephen King, when they forced him to give him an audience digestible ending to The Dark Tower. He's like, fine. If you, he even writes in the last book, he's like, if you are a fan of this series and what it's really about, you're going to stop reading this here. For everyone else, candy coated bullshit, go have fun.
No one believes this, but I've never read. I never read it.
The ending?
I stopped where he said to stop.
Damn, that's awesome. I don't have that self-control. I read it.
Somebody told me what happened, but I didn't. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll take the out here because I knew it wouldn't be satisfying.
Right.
So I knew it would be some bullshit like he gets to the tower and it's actually a tower. And the Dark Tower was the friends he made along the way, but also there was a literal tower. Right. The end.
I wish I had that self-control and I wish I could have done it, but I read on and I wish I could have had the self-control to not watch the Matthew McConaughey, version of Randall Flagg on screen, but I had to do it. But again,
they can make it up to me by making a really good The Stand.
Yeah.
But they already made a really good The Stand, but I want another really good one. Like, did you watch that one for TV? That was so good. Like Gary Sinise. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah. Obviously, Twin Peaks is David Lynch's Dark Tower, and he lost control of it and made sure that everyone knew how upset he was about that. There's so much to Twin Peaks, and there's so much. There's actually another content creator called Twin Perfect. If you really feel the need to have a 4-hour ending to Dark Tower explained and digestible, he'll sit down and he'll talk to you for 4 hours, this guy. And it's really smart and it's really planned out and he has reasons for everything. But again, I feel like to really appreciate Lynch's work, especially his magnum opus, watch it, and whatever you feel like it means to you, you're not wrong and you're not right.
Mm-hmm. He's more than just Twin Peaks. Like, David Lynch, I would say primarily he's a film director, and he's done a ton of film shorts. He's done a ton of like side projects, but his contribution to the zeitgeist, if you haven't counted, it's way fewer films than you'd expect, right? For a guy that's been making films since the 1970s,
Yeah, feature-wise, for sure.
Yeah. So he's been making feature films since 1977, and he only has a handful of them. And you would really expect there to have been more for the way he's lauded for his contribution to the zeitgeist. So as much as we love Twin Peaks, it's more than that. And I think the constraints of filming for television didn't really get his signatures across. So I think from a storytelling perspective, it's pure Lynch. But I think he does some wizardry with the camera and with editing and with sound and lighting and a lot of stuff that he couldn't really do in Twin Peaks. So I think it's worth going into what he does as a film director and kind of leaving Twin Peaks just like as a separate thing that we all like.
Right.
And if we compartmentalize it a little bit, I think we're going to focus for the rest of this episode on his signatures as a film director.
And what better place to start, as we always love to do, first feature out the gate. And not fair to say, because this man was he had something like 80 something shorts. Yeah. So it's quite extensive. He really honed his craft, but by the time he was in college, let him use this mansion just at his disposal. And man, what a first fucking feature with Eraserhead, like 1977, and that's when he met his muse in Jack Nance. You know, we talk a lot about that, like Jeremy Saulnier and Macon Blair. For, you know, Jack Nance was his muse, like through and through, and just the way that they found each other and the mystery that's still out there. I mean, we're in the year 2020. Information is rampant. You can't keep anything a secret. No one still knows how they made Spike the baby, you know? It's like... and you never will. I think it's like him and his daughter know, and they have sworn, like, upon pain of death to never say. And, I mean, it's super creepy and messed up from what I heard, because I guess they were trying to push an answer at him, and he started like getting really emotional. So it's better not to know. Just enjoy like everything that movie was. He has probably one of the most important indie films of all time in Eraserhead. One of the most influential, we'll say. If you're a filmmaker, you probably, you know, especially today's filmmakers like a Robert Eggers or something, you see The Lighthouse now, and you go, this is a man that's seen Eraserhead, right? Or like Ari Aster, or any of these like up and coming, just great horror filmmakers of today. And it's just like, it has Eraserhead all over it. The comedy, the darkness, and then you go down the line. It's just like, and then he has one of the classics of all time in The Elephant Man. So yeah, you think about all of his movies in a bubble until you get to like his like LA trilogy and stuff. But like you put like Blue Velvet out there and all this stuff, and you're just like, oh my God, this all came from the same person.
Yeah.
It feels disjointed, but it's all him, and it's all incredible.
Well, I think the fact that everything doesn't feel samey. Mm-hmm. Like, he's compared to Tarantino a lot, and I think Tarantino movies feel like Tarantino movies. Like, you couldn't have given the straight story to Quentin Tarantino.
No.
I think if you start somewhere like Eraserhead, I think a lot of people hold this up because I think it shows what is possible in like avant-garde cinema versus like what you should do. I don't think it's a blueprint. I think it's just sort of like, don't feel constrained, because he was not trying to make an avant-garde film per se. He wasn't trying to like, oh, I watch a lot of French New Wave movies and now I think I know how to make a French New Wave movie. He was just like, I got some weird ideas and I'm going to make a David Lynch movie. And I think Eraserhead kind of showed that you can have nods to your cinematic influences without using it as a blueprint. Because you can't tell someone, if someone asks you what Eraserhead's about, you're like, you just got to see that movie.
Yeah.
It sounds pretentious, but it's not a pretentious thing. It's just sort of like, you can't describe it because you don't know how much of it was what you were supposed to fill in and how much of it was what happened.
Absolutely.
So I was lucky, and I saw Eraserhead fairly young. Like, not so young that it freaked me out, but like, I feel like young enough that I was sort of like, all right, I get what you can do with movies, sort of a deal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It was a bar. It was a benchmark in cinema. It was, here's what you could do with no effects. Everything's practical. Camera tricks, in-camera tricks, sound design, editing, everything. When all of that comes together, that set the bar of what filmmakers had to kind of, you know, get over or get past or even meet to be like, you know, this is pretty crazy stuff.
But the beauty of this movie is no one can say it doesn't hold up, because it's not holding up to anything. Like, something you notice, I think more in stand-up comedy than you do in film, is when somebody influenced the way like a ton of people do stuff. You go back and listen to their stuff, you're like, this is so hack, because at the time nobody was doing that. But like, if you watch Gary Shandling's stand-up, you're like, why does everyone say Gary Shandling was so funny? All of this stuff is pretty basic. But he was like the first one to do some of the premises he did. So yeah, everyone that came after him sort of did it and maybe did it better. So you're like, everybody does this exact thing now. So when somebody sort of launches like a sort of way to do something, everybody that comes after sort of improves on it or at least riffs on it. So when you go back, you're like, this doesn't hold up because everybody does this now. So I think with Lynch, it's funny that Eraserhead kind of told everybody's like, just make some weird piece of shit, but also you can't look at Eraserhead and be like, this doesn't hold up because it's so weird that it just stands on its own. And it's like everybody did weird shit after, but also this is still suitably weird. And I think a lot of great first films, you can't necessarily say that. Like if somebody launched like a whole movement in cinema and then you see all the movies that it inspired and then go back and watch it, you're sort of like, oh, this is just like everything else I've seen. But for something like Eraserhead, I don't think that's the case.
One of his most straightforward storytelling films goes also. You know, it's, again, open to interpretation. I swear that will be the last time I say that. But it's just like you could sit down and watch it, and it's not just weird for the sake of weird. It's actually telling you a story. It's telling you that this person has, you know, relationship issues. You know, that's pretty, you know, everyone could kind of pick that up. And the stress of being a father and fatherhood, and if you're not ready, and all these different things. It has such straightforward commentary without it being shoved down your throat, without you know, Patrick Stewart doing a voiceover and explaining everything, which is, you know, why one of his biggest failures in Lynch's, you know, filmography in Dune, not because of Patrick Stewart, although he happens to be in there, but just like I felt like the studio constantly was telling him to explain literally every scene, everybody's inner thoughts, and because no one wanted to see Eraserhead with that big of a budget.
So what happened with Dune was he was perfectly content to be like, I read this story and it made me think some fantastical stuff. I would love to put people in the same frame of mind I was in when I was reading this book. And nobody wanted that. They wanted Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to give them Blade Runner, but it's also like trying to make a 90-minute version of The Stand while we're talking about Stephen King.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
If someone's like, I want to talk about how crazy it would be if everybody died of this virus and then there were some survivors and they all had a weird fever dream. That's what I want to do. And the studio's like, yeah, but you gotta...
Yeah. But Star Wars, lightsabers.
You have 21 POV characters. I want them all to get a scene where they grow.
Yeah.
And it's not Lynch's fault. It was just too much source material, and I think everybody wanted a different Dune. So when you do like a Dune miniseries, it's way better and no one cares. So
right.
It's almost like he ruined Dune.
But it's like he did the best he could with it. I feel like there is stuff to like about it. The costumes and the set design, just that opening sequence when they bring that weird alien, you know, like baby.
Everything is alien.
Well, you know, the baby from Eraserhead, but just in a giant jar that's like smoking, has like a vagina mouth. You know, that's like, oh my God, you know, this is a David Lynch film. I'm like, I'm totally on board. And then, like you said, it just felt like so much either studio meddling or whoever meddled. Maybe it just got away from him. Maybe he's just not supposed to direct these type of films with this type of scope or this type of track work already laid down. Maybe he's too much of an artist and he needs room.
I think as much as he was a trailblazer for being like, this is what's possible for avant-garde cinema, I think he's a trailblazer as a cautionary tale for studios. It's like, don't fuck with artists.
Right.
Let them make the movie they're trying to make. Let them make the thing they want to make, because like if you fuck with artists, you get a bad Dune that no one's happy with.
Yeah. Dune
was a monument to compromise between his vision and the studios. And when you compromise, nobody gets what they want. Not the least of which is like the people that went to that movie and they're like, why am I being presented with a 13-page pamphlet that I have to read before the movie starts?
Could be an argument made where it's just like, well, the Elephant Man was kind of a big story and kind of an established world and thing also. But Mel Brooks was just like, he was a fan of Eraserhead, and he knew that he needed that type of person to helmet, where that was just in my opinion, I think the Elephant Man was just way more in his wheelhouse, where he could be a little bit more, have the grotesque on display a little bit more. You know, he was in that, he was just like more conducive to be a little bit quieter and slower and more artsy, and have the performances ring out rather than giant sandworms.
And the thing that was great about the Elephant Man was, I think a lot of the tension comes from the juxtaposition between like one guy being, you know, freakish looking, but he's the only real human.
Right.
It's the story of man's inhumanity to Elephant Man, right? Mm-hmm. So I think he was a good choice for that, just because I think he could really establish a tone where you could really feel for how terrified Merrick was, like at all times, you know, because it's everybody's acting like everything's fine and he's freaking out, but it's just because everyone's treating him like a freak. He doesn't feel like he doesn't feel like a freak per se, you know. So I think it was a good choice for that, just because everything was. You don't have to indict everyone with like a voiceover. You can just sort of indict them with their own behavior, and I think the way you establish the tone and show something like that it was a good move to have him do it.
Yeah, it was a perfect fit, and that would go on to it would really spell out the rest of his career, right? Like, because that aesthetic of the establishment with the dark underbelly tone that was really introduced with Eraserhead, but it was so much more well refined in the Elephant Man that just like popped Blue Velvet out, and Twin Peaks, and you know, Lost Highway, and all those other films where it's just like, here's the thing, I'm gonna show you just the grotesqueness in what is the establishment, you know, walking through a field and then finding an ear, you know, sets off this, you know, young wannabe gumshoe into this world where he had no fucking idea went this deep and this crazy, like Mad Max Fury Road type of villain, Frank Booth. Put these very normal people or group of people, and then you thrust them into this crazy situation, and that's what, you know, that's the beauty that comes out of it, is just the sheer grotesqueness of the person that lives next door to you. You know, that's what makes it scary. That's why Lynch films are some of the most terrifying horror films ever. Mulholland Drive is a scarier film than any Hellraiser I've ever seen. It's just because he does that, I call it like behind curtains and corners type deal, where he always has some sort of like curtains or dark hallway, or you know, you go to the back of a diner and you have to just crawl uncomfortably, like move like you're walking, like you're trepidatious.
Yes.
And then you get to a point, and then, you know, something happens or something doesn't, but there's just like this crazy payoff. When I watched Mulholland Drive for the first time, when it was like, I think it just came on HBO, and it was in the early 2000s. Oh,
you didn't go to a Blockbuster?
I worked at a Blockbuster, but I saw it. I saw this one on HBO, and that scene, the dream sequence in the diner at the beginning, I fucking grabbed the remote and switched the channel, and I just started cracking up at myself. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life.
You know what? I have a theory about this, about why some people do horror well and some people do it poorly. There are two different terms for scary shit. So in the art world, they have two different terms. There's horror and there's terror. Horror is the apprehension of something terrifying.
Right.
Terror is something terrifying. So like something popping out and scaring you, or like seeing some demon saw someone's arms off, or like Freddy Krueger slashes someone's guts out. You're like, that's terror.
Yeah.
But horror is the apprehension. Terror is Bruce the giant shark in Jaws working properly and them putting it in the movie way more than they should. And horror is the shark keeps fucking up and they're like, all right, well, let's shoot around it. horror is so much more effective than terror because your mind fills in the blanks and your own apprehension is what tortures you. Terror is just on the screen, and if it's a jump scare, great. You got my fight or flight response going, and I get a little, shot of adrenaline, but like that's it.
Yeah.
But horror, it's when you are waiting for something to happen that may or may not. That's why people that do actual horror movies, I think, do a better job than people that do torture porn or just jump scare shit.
Yes.
I don't want to see a terror movie. And I think too many people don't realize that they should be doing horror and they're doing terror.
But
so
terror
I think
movies are popcorn movies.
Yeah. It's great to take a date on and there's a jump scare and she puts her arm around you and then, you cut a hole in the popcorn bucket. I get it. But but I think the people that do horror can introduce horror elements into movies that are not necessarily horror movies, and you don't even realize you're holding your breath. And I think Lynch gets that. Because Eraserhead wasn't a horror movie, but it was horrifying.
And to some, it could be called a dark comedy. Just like I said, his films are the most scary films for most other filmmakers. His films are also hilarious. There is so much comedy in his films. I mean, in more of a straightforward ones like Wild at Heart, is it funny to see Nick Cage acting like Elvis for 90 minutes? Absolutely. But
which is why so many directors have made a movie where Nick Cage gets to act like Elvis for 90 minutes.
It's a winning formula. Even David Lynch could appreciate that. But
David Lynch is like, oh, I wish I had thought of having him skydive.
It's also hilarious and horrifying when Bobby Peru is in Laura Dern's face after he asks to use the restroom, right? And it's just like, it's so uncomfortable. He makes the most uncomfortable films because you're laughing and you want to look away. Your face is hot. He gets this emotion out of me, and I'm sure most viewers so well, because it's like, why does Bobby Peru have to have like the world's stubbiest looking teeth? It's just like this weird, quirky thing. It's a Lynchian twist, but then, he's completely terrifying. Then when he gets his head blown off or he shoots his own head off, it's like Tarantino-esque violence, and it's funny again. So it's this push and pull where you're never comfortable watching a David Lynch film. And I think I was thinking about this a lot when I was doing the research on Lynch, why I liked Uncut Gems so much. And we talk about this film ad nauseum, but I had that same feeling while watching Uncut Gems, where I was just like, I was never, ever comfortable. I was sweating the whole time. My palms were moist. I was laughing and uncomfortable the entire time. I'm like, this is why I like this.
That's what laughter, like, not everything that makes you laugh is funny, and not everything that makes you laugh is comedy. Well, laughter it's an involuntary response at the relief of tension. Sometimes the tension is like you realizing that you were confused by a joke that made a left turn, or sometimes there's some tension. You're like, I think this person's really bad, and then they flip it. Lots of things make people laugh. It's an involuntary response. That's why, like, it's so magical to like construct a joke, which is really a joke is a lot like a magic trick,
right.
So that's why a movie that is really unsettling can make you laugh. And it's not funny per se, but what it has done is it's built a lot of tension, and then it's found a relief valve for it. And your response is to laugh because it just relieves all that tension. So his films aren't funny, but they do make you laugh. And that's a contradiction unless you really think about like what physiologically laughter really is.
Sure.
So he's building a lot of tension because he's good at horror, essentially. But like, one way to relieve tension is have some over-the-top cartoon violence, and you laugh at that, and you're like, what's wrong with me? But what's happened is all that tension of wondering what's going to happen all gets released. And it's so over-the-top, you feel even more comfortable just letting that out. Because the more cartoonish violence is, the less real it seems, and the more it's like, oh, this is okay. Everything's fine. Like if someone gets stabbed, you're like, it's kind of surreal. But if like someone explodes, it feels more like it's fine because you're like, it's so surreal that your brain doesn't even register it as a problem, if that makes sense. So I think that's why Lynch movies make you laugh, is because they're so, I don't want to say cartoonish, but like
they're dreamlike.
Yeah, but like that moment where Bobby Peru's head explodes, that's when you wake up from the dream. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not actually in that situation. I'm in my bed and I'm safe and I've pissed myself. Everything's fine. You can go roll over in your own piss and go back to sleep. You know, everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
Just me?
No, I'm with you. We're both old. Bladder control's not our strong suit.
I can't be shuffling into the bathroom willy-nilly every time I piss myself in my sleep.
Yeah. I just ordered a John Deere lawnmower to go travel to wherever the hell you live. I'll see you in 4 months. But on
that actor had bone cancer, sir.
And killed himself right after. How Lynchian, you know. Jeez.
See, I just laughed. But it's not because that's per se funny.
It's sweet old man.
Yeah, as a sweet old man had cancer, which is the worst thing.
Right.
And then he committed suicide, which is the second worst thing.
The release of tension, though. You didn't have to worry about the cancer.
Jesus. See? These things are not funny, but they did make us laugh, and that's what we're trying to illustrate here. Get ourselves sad with that one. Jesus.
The release of tension, as far as that goes. But think about this in any other filmmaker's hands. You read this on paper. I'm going to see a little person in a suit dancing around, and we're going to get an extreme close-up of him eating Garmonbozia, or, you know, aka cream corn. It sounds like a Farrelly Brothers movie, right? It's just like, oh, this is going to be funny. We're going to make fun of the little person because he's wearing a suit and he looks all important and it's going to be played like a mean-spirited joke. But then when you're watching it, you're just like, fuck, this is uncomfortable. So even the things that are on paper seem like a gag, it flips it and it builds tension also. So he could do it both ways. If he could do just one of those well, he's a master, but he does both sides well.
Well, that's the difference between like a Michael J. Anderson role and like a Vern Troyer role. I think Michael J. Anderson was cast not because, you know, he was something to be laughed at, but just because watching him dance made you feel weird. You weren't laughing at him, but you're like, this is close, but it's off.
Mm-hmm.
So watching Michael J. Anderson dancing and also doing all his dialogue backwards, and then they played it in reverse, so it sounded off, you know? Because you could tell that he's not delivering the straight dialogue. What they did was they like phonetically memorized what all their lines sounded like backwards, and they played the tape in reverse. So when you hear that, you're like, that's a little bit off, but you don't know why.
Some of your friends are real.
That's why he was cast, just because sort of like it's off. It's just a little bit off, and that's why scenes like that were so effective to me, because you can't always place exactly what's wrong.
Why he does the doppelganger trope so well. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's not just in Twin Peaks, although that's probably the most prominent of this because it went on for so long with, you know, Agent Cooper, the actual doppelganger, Dougie later on in the later seasons, or, you know, even with the, you know, the arm, and then the arm gets evolved. What Twin Peaks is basically based off of is just that trope. It's all about, you know, the duality of individuals and towns and all that. But I mean, he did it great with Fred Madison and Pete Dayton in Lost Highway, Betty and Diane in Mulholland Drive. First off, that's a lot to ask from your actors, right? Each one of his actors have to play multiple roles per movie. And we're not talking about Mike Myers playing Fat Bastard in Austin Powers. It's completely different deconstructions of the same person, where it even goes to the nth degree in like Lost Highway, where they had to just like add Balthazar Getty in with Bill Pullman, where it's like two different actors playing the same person.
Coming face to face with your doppelganger is, I think on a fundamental level, people realize how surreal that would be. Because every time we've seen it portrayed, people are like, what the, because imagine what that would be like, coming face to face with your own doppelganger. So I think anytime it's portrayed in film, I think there's something innate in the human brain that you understand that would not be like a normal occurrence. You wouldn't be like, oh, hey, you're handsome. You know, you would shit yourself. And for whatever reason, maybe he's had dreams where he encountered his own doppelganger. I don't know how he came to this conclusion, but I think he goes back to that well because it's so effective. There's nothing freakier than coming face to face with yourself, and you're like, if you are me, am I not myself?
Right. Who's in control?
Because there's one of you, and when there's two of you, am I me? It fundamentally undermines your own sense of self and your own ego. Coming face to face with your own id is fundamentally destabilizing. Even though people don't think about it in those terms, they would just be like, it would be freaky to have a clone. I think for whatever reason, he just tried that, and when it worked, he did it a few more times, and it's always freaky. He's not trying to jump scare people. He's trying to make you feel weird, but not be 100% sure why you feel weird. You're like, yes, I understand what he did there. He made them recite their dialogue backwards and play the tape backwards, right, so everything sounds like it's in a tunnel or whatever.
That's weird.
It sounds
for the
like
audience.
It sounds like they're speaking on the inhale versus the exhale. I get why but like it makes you feel a way you've never felt before. I think that's what Lynch does. That's why he's so effective. He makes you feel ways you've never felt before, and one of those ways is imagining confronting your own doppelganger. Or in the case of Lost Highway, you're not yourself. You're someone else forever. That's freaky too, right?
I think it's perfectly done in Mulholland Drive, where it's that movie's all about dreams and the fugue state, and the fact that I always felt like Diane and Camilla were kind of the real versions, and then like Betty and Rita. Yeah, Betty and Rita is just Diane's fantasy. You know, it's just like she's so in love with Camilla, and Camilla's just like, it's just that, you know, it's your
I had the opposite interpretation. I think that's
really
cool that you said that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And maybe it's just because chronologically, I thought he established Betty and Rita to be like, here's the people, but like, here's the fantasy version of both of them.
Yeah.
I thought it was very deliberate that he introduced Betty first. But I think it's really interesting that you interpret it as like he sort of went backwards and is like, Betty is who she wishes she could have been.
Yeah, I think so, because I feel like, and again, no one's right, no one's wrong. Who knows
if we both asked David Lynch, he wouldn't tell us.
Or he would say that. He would be like, yeah, you guys are right, you know. Or, you know,
you're both right.
Yeah, but are we really? No. And then, you know, smoke a cigarette and walk away. I feel like that movie establishes itself with the unrelated dream sequence, with the diner sequence with that guy and everything. So it's just like, okay, we're doing a dream movie, and that's when you just get thrust into the dream, and then you kind of you know, then the makeup and the veneer wears off, and that's when you really get to see just kind of what a pathetic character, you know, Diane really is, and how she wishes that, you know, this person would love her. It's this, you know, it's that, like, it's not even just like in romantic relationships. We've all had those friends where you're just like, oh, you know, I feel like I'm out of this person's league to even hang out with, or like, you know, in relationships or anything. And I feel like that's what that was. So she created this thing. She threw her a bone in real life. She couldn't handle it, so she had her killed, you know, and then everyone goes to the purgatory theater thing. And that movie is just, if I do recommend David Lynch films, I usually start there. And I've had people even come back to me and say, I hated that. Like, that was so boring. It was
well,
so
then you're
stupid.
going to fucking hate The Lost Highway then.
Yeah, exactly.
You want a real David Lynch trip? Pull up the 2002 Oscars and see who won.
Oh, God. Who was it?
That was the year Ron Howard won Best Director for A Beautiful Mind over David Lynch for Mulholland Drive, Ridley Scott for Black Hawk Down, Peter Jackson for Fellowship of the Ring, and Robert Altman for Gosford Park.
Stop it.
I love to be mad. I love to be mad about something trivial because there's so much shit that's just terrible.
Right.
Going on, but like it feels so impotent to be mad. But if you're mad at the Oscars, it's frivolous and like you could just laugh it off. Right. So it's a coping mechanism for me to like rechannel my anger at like genuine injustice at something frivolous, so I can just obliterate it with my brain lasers and just be like, no, it's the Oscars who are wrong. There's something I can. Yeah. I can do something about the Oscars. I can roast the Oscars. I can't roast racism.
Right.
All I can do is just be mad at it. So I'm focusing my eye lasers elsewhere. I don't know what else to do, man. So let's just be mad that A Beautiful Mind won Best Picture.
Full stop.
And like I don't know that necessarily Mulholland Drive gets nominated for Best Picture that year, but I think Vanilla Sky was better than Gosford Park and In the Bedroom and Moulin Rouge.
Thank you. Everyone hates Vanilla Sky.
Because Tom Cruise sucks.
That's fine. Everyone sucks in the movie, just the movie's good in spite of the
Cameron
actors.
Diaz sucks too.
Yeah, so does Penelope Cruz. Got another.
That's
Jason
true.
Lee's terrible. Everyone's in that movie is bad.
That's a good point. Every actor they cast in Vanilla Sky is really just the worst, but
it's a good movie in spite of itself.
What I want to suggest is the man who wasn't there should have won every award.
Yes.
And Roger Deakins didn't even win for Best Cinematography. So,
you know what I'm gonna do from now on when I'm gonna not be as nice to people that want it. Like if I'm talking David Lynch or something, they're like, okay, what movie should I start with? I'm just gonna tell them to start with Inland Empire, and then if they show up to work the next day, I'll be very surprised. Like that's a movie that even tests the staunchest of Lynch fans.
It's his final form.
That's a good way to put it.
Inland Empire was David Lynch's final form because he didn't do a feature after.
No,
it's been 15 years and he hasn't done a feature because he just feels like he nailed it. And can you argue?
Yes, I can. Well, I can and I can't. He still says he's fishing for ideas, and that's how he literally. In the interviews and stuff, they're just like, are you done with TV? No. Are you done with features? No. I just want to fall in love. He just wants to fall in love. He wants to put out his fishing line, and whatever happy ideas come, and if he falls in love with it, he'll do it. I believe he's one of those. The man can't take a day off. He's doing stuff.
He's doing like,
weatherman.
I have to do COVID content, but I won't put out a feature for 15 years, but I can't go 10 minutes without releasing a digital short. It's crazy to me.
He just can't stop. He even said at the expense of his own fathering skills or family skills, he just works.
While we're on the subject, can you name a better cast than Inland Empire? Like, yeah, it's missing Kyle MacLachlan, but like, look at the cast of Inland Empire. That's like the Lynchiest cast ever.
Yeah.
And he pulled like good performances out of people like Justin Theroux, who are like, I'm good looking for a living.
He's done good work.
Okay. Like what?
Like The Leftovers. You didn't like The Leftovers?
I would have said 6 Feet Under. He was good on that.
Oh, he was in 6 Feet Under. Damn.
Yeah, he was Brenda's boyfriend.
Yeah.
For like a whole season until she cheated on him.
Yeah.
Delightful person. But like, when has he ever been three-dimensional? I don't know. Like, I in terms of casting them, it's like, that was... You could make 3 more movies with that like whole cast.
Inland Empire should have been a Netflix miniseries of like something like a Black Mirror, but just like Lynch shorts. and I think it would have worked really well. Because there's a whole episode of just Laura Dern sitting with Grace Zabriskie, the visitor, like when she comes to her house, or Mary Steenburgen later as the other visitor. There's a whole movie with all those girls, you know, her interactions with Laura Dern. There's so many different type of movies, and that's because he didn't have a structure. Like, he had his structure to the genesis of this project was a girl's in trouble or a woman's in trouble, whatever the tag, a woman in trouble. And so then they just kept, he would go out and shoot a scene when he got an idea, and then, you know, he'd wait a little bit, he'd get another idea, he'd go out and shoot another scene that just didn't connect at all. He kept doing that, shooting these like disjointed scenes until the end of it, and then he just kind of put it all together, and it wound up making as much sense as it could, but it's, you know,
under the circumstances, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like he's never been constrained by feeling like it had to make sense, and I feel like that's why he butted heads with the studio on Dune, because they're like, look, if you don't release a 13-page pamphlet, no one's going to know what the fuck's going on, because they didn't read this 900-page book. And he's like, I don't care.
Right.
They don't need to know what's going on. He's never spoon-fed you shit. How many times in a David Lynch film can you name that he's done voiceover that meaningfully explained anything?
Nope,
if he does VO, it's to make you feel weird. It's not to tell you anything you need to know.
Right.
It's to confuse you. Like, VO is sort of like, oh, I'm a ghost, and here's my ghost thoughts. It's never I'm the narrator and I'm telling you exposition. It's always like, oh, I'm a fucking ghost, or I never existed, or I'm your doppelganger.
Right.
And somehow I have access to your ear canals as your doppelganger, and I'm just going to fuck with you and make you feel disjointed.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that, like, he's not concerned with anything making sense, I feel like the less constrained he is by studios, the better his work is. So, like, it's upsetting that, like, now it's 2020 and everybody realizes you just write David Lynch a check and let him do some shit. No one's writing him a check and letting him do some shit. So he's sort of like, I'll interview a monkey for 20 minutes. I don't give a shit.
Right.
I'm David Lynch. Why aren't people giving him big checks now? The Elephant Man. Okay, he made the Eraserhead to be like, I can make something like Eraserhead that, like, not everybody gets, but the people who get it so hardcore that they're getting Eraserhead tattoos. Then they give him The Elephant Man, and it's nominated for 8 fucking Oscars. So at that point, why don't you just be like, all right, here's a check. What do you want to do? What are you capable of? But, like, they can't, because they've never created anything in their life, and their whole job is like, I got promoted at 38 to the head of a studio, and I feel like if I don't tell someone no, then I haven't done my job. Wasn't it someone was the CEO at Fruit of the Loom or something like that, and they got promoted to studio?
like Paramount or something. Yeah.
That was a Soderbergh story. I forget what the whole deal is there, but, like, I'm not saying I'd do a better job. I wouldn't. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but at the same time, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about either. So just, like, get out of the man's way. So if your first movie is Eraserhead, and your second movie is nominated for 8 Academy Awards, when the third movie comes around, maybe just.
And if you can't just get out of the way, then why pick him in the first place? For that type of project.
You know why? Because the budget for this movie was $40 million.
And they saw what he did with Eraserhead for $5.
Yeah, but but they gave him $40 million.
Right.
Because Sting had a very long hospitality rider. He's like, I will mutter underwear, but you can't show any side ball. And they're like, no side ball? We gotta completely rework the metal underwear. There's a big V, but also there's gotta be like a side V.
Lynch thought they were casting Spike, the calf fetus, in the role of Sting, so he was confused also. He's like, I thought it was the calf fetus again.
I thought the spike must flow. I stepped on your joke making the worst pun, and I'm really sorry.
It was good. It was good.
What does Lynch do well? What does David Lynch do that nobody else does well. And you know what I think? I think he puts POV shots on inanimate objects. And that's a weird thing to say, but I don't know how else to describe how some of the shots he structures are.
He frames it like a photographer or a painter.
Okay. Oh, in this scene, I'm not a person. I'm actually a whetstone, and my job is to grind the teeth of a fucking saw in a sawmill. Okay, that's what I do. I'm going to do it for 11 seconds while you play the name of 3 actors I don't recognize. Is that the guy who put the bottles on his fingers in The Warriors? Okay, I recognize his name a little bit.
Angelo Badalamenti could really cover up a lot of things with his sweeping soundtracks.
Like, he works with Angelo so much that they just click. Sometimes you meet somebody, like I met Jon Dunning, and it was like, we click. We're not doing good work, but we are.
We're doing
feel like
Lynchian style work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, this podcast has been a long-running joke.
On the audience.
On you.
And on ourselves. I like his story of how they create. And they don't sit down physically next to each other anymore. He's found Skype. So it's like I'm in the room with Angelo, and it's the same thing because technology is great.
You're doing a good Lynch right now.
Thank you. I think it's the booze talking. How much Blue Velvet you got left?
Too much.
All right.
I feel like if I drink any more, I will be like David Lynch in Twin Peaks, where it's like, these hearing aids. It's like, those are headphones and you're drunk. Like, you're just yelling at your mic and peeing a little.
Love how he did that juxtaposition in Wild at Heart, where it's just like you get those Angelo, orchestra or orchestratic, like, moments of like romance and stuff, and then you just full on death metal. And he did that because that's what that movie is. It's a love story that goes 100 miles an hour into a brick wall. It's so underrated. Like, I think that Wild at Heart is probably his most underrated and most fun film. Like,
yes,
hands down.
I think you made the observation that is sort of overshadowed by True Romance, which came years later.
Yeah.
Like, why don't people respect Wild at Heart the way they do True Romance? Which, like, True Romance feels like a rough draft of a Tarantino movie. But, like, Wild at Heart feels like a finished movie.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the cast of that movie.
I think it's because, and this might be oversimplifying it, and I wasn't reviewing movies back when Wild at Heart came out, but it's because Ebert shit on it. He literally said, David Lynch is so flippant with his violence. He had it out for Lynch after Blue Velvet because of Isabella Rossellini. Isabella Rossellini's just like, fuck you, I love doing these type of films, and
because Ebert was such a he's flippant with his violence. Oh, I'm sorry, did Misery, Home Alone, Goodfellas, Crybaby, and Total Recall all come out the same year?
Right. But when David Foster Wallace is just like, it put me back in my fucking place to watch the ending scene of Blue Velvet, seeing the yellow man dead on his feet, and just the way that was framed.
There's a moment when a guy named the Yellow Man is shot in an apartment, and then Jeffrey, the main character, runs to the apartment, and the guy's dead, but he's still standing there. There's no explanation, He's just standing there, and it's almost classically French, Franco-philistically surreal, and yet it seems absolutely true and absolutely appropriate, which I all of a sudden realized that the point of being postmodern or being avant-garde or whatever wasn't to follow in a certain kind of tradition, that all that stuff is BS imposed by critics and camp followers afterwards, that what the really great artists do, and it sounds very trite to say it out loud, but what the really great artists do is they're entirely themselves. They're entirely themselves. They've got their own vision, their own way of fracturing reality, and that if it's authentic and true, you will feel it in your nerve endings. And this is what Blue Velvet did for me. I'm not suggesting it would do it for any other viewer, but Lynch very much helped snap me out of a kind of adolescent delusion that I was in about what sort of avant-garde art could be.
But no one was listening to him. Birds and the Siskells of the world are just like, his movies are too violent and he's just brutal to women and all this stuff. But it's like, no, it's a fucking art
Are you
piece.
telling me the cartoon violence of that movie was worse than Kathy Bates?
Right?
Literally breaking, well, not literally, but like,
well,
you show the guy's foot turn
Right.
When she whacks him with a sledgehammer, like that's less violent somehow than I don't know. There are a lot of violent movies came out in 1990, and like nobody gave Goodfellas a hard time
Right.
for the violence in Goodfellas, or Total Recall, which like Total Recall was funny
Yeah. Yeah.
because of how violent it was.
Right.
Home Alone was the most violent movie of 1990, but they said Rassam Frassam and charged up a staircase after stepping on a rusty nail and getting tetanus. So
Yeah.
like it's fine, but like man, there were more murders and dances with wolves than there were in any David Lynch movie that came out in 1990.
But it's because it exposed those people, because Lynch films didn't fit in those boxes. Home Alone was a family romp Looney Tunes bit. And, you know, Goodfellas was a mob movie, so expect violence. And horror movies were for horror fans. But, you know, you're selling Wild at Heart as a romance / blah, 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 blah. This is pre-Tarantino, and they didn't know what the fuck box to put it in.
They didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Quigley Down Under, more murders.
Yeah, sure.
But it's Quigley.
It's Quigley.
And he's down under. Wives are going to sit in that movie and imagine going for a mustache ride, and it's that you can sell.
Right.
Pennywise the Clown tore an 8-year-old boy's arm off that year, but you know what? Wild at Heart, too violent.
Too violent. Building tension, and how, just going back to how you're never comfortable watching his films. And a big reason for that is, like, he gets a lot of credit for visuals, he gets a lot of credit for writing, but the thing that he probably deserves the most credit for is his sound design. You could just be watching a scene in, say, Lost Highway, and they're just literally driving down the road, and then you just get this big, loud, like, almost jump scare-esque, distorted yelling, or just, like, crash of some sort, and it makes no sense to where it is. But I've decided that it's just to keep you, like, engrossed in the picture, because, you know, there's sometimes where he does do a lot of, like, you know, you're watching a David Lynch film if they're driving on a non-lit, you know, 2-lane highway, right? That's in everything.
But juxtapose that scene and that like music swell you're talking about,
right,
with the next year's Big Lebowski.
Oh yeah.
The scene where they're going to do the drop off and Walter's like, I switched out the money with my underwear. Credence is playing. They got a plan.
Yeah.
Walter's gonna slow down to 35 and bail out of the vehicle, double back. Like, that whole thing, it was so Lynchian, but like, okay, so anyone who defends or even like rants about the Big Lebowski at this point, like, I get it. I get how it sounds, but at the same time, like, that movie worked for a reason, and it worked for so long for so many people for a reason. So, like, I felt like the Big Lebowski, to an extent, was that scene specifically was a parody of David Lynch. I don't know if they did it like consciously, but the whole, like, when they're driving down the highway, you know, it's Southern California, it's dark, you can't see anything, it's just like scrub on both sides of the road.
Right.
All you can see is just like the lines, and they're forming a plan, and the music's playing on the radio. Like, I dug it. And I really felt like that scene was so funny because it felt like it was a parody of every serious movie where people are driving down the highway at night making a plan.
Sure.
But, like, he's like, I'm going to give kidnappers my underpants. And that's why it was so fucking funny.
It always gets really uncomfortable if you've seen a couple Lynch films, because you know there's something in the mist, right? You know, to borrow from like a Frank Darabont Stephen King adaptation, but there's always something in the mist, and I feel like that's his mist. It's either those darkness on highways or curtains or corners, but like, you never know what you're going to find. You might, you know, Laura Dern might look over and see her mother her literal mother as the Wicked Witch, you know, following her in the Wizard of Oz parody. Or you could pull off and there's Sherilyn Fenn in this horrifying car accident that they're just like thrust into that like plays nothing with the rest of the movie. It's just in there. It's like the lady with the deer scene in A Straight Story. It's those, he primes you in a way. If you are a diehard fan of his, or have just seen a lot of his movies, he kind of telegraphs it a little bit. But it's not telegraphs in a way just like, oh, I know what this is gonna, something's gonna happen. You're just like, oh shit, something's gonna happen now. And 9 times out of 10, it's something as silly as someone dressed in a like a Halloween, a party store witch costume, or it's something really, really terrifying,
or a Halloween party store death costume.
That too. Even his little like weird overlays, like the scene in Lost Highway. This is how much credit he has for those like kind of jump scares. Is the scene in Lost Highway where Bill Pullman's like laying next to Patricia Arquette and he looks over and it's like a literal like overlay that I could put on my phone editing app of the Mystery Man over her face. It looks so comical, but I swear to God, I'll ask 99 people out there and they'll all lie to me and say, oh, that was just stupid. But I jumped, like, and I know everyone else did. Everyone did.
You jumped, you liar.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's just
you
like,
liar. You jumped.
Laura Dern's like weird clown goofy face in Inland Empire. It's like,
whoa. I think Laura Dern is classically attractive. Saying she has a weird clown goofy face
at the
in
end
Jurassic
of the movie.
Park.
He calls it tidbits, and Patricia Arquette is solid gold. He's just like that old timey dude that just like has them. He still uses a megaphone and smokes cigarettes on screen. He's like a real life Ed Wood.
Yeah, people like on set. He says stuff like Peachy Keen.
You're gonna get him running for the fire exits. He told that to Naomi Watts once. She's like, I had no idea if that meant I did a good job or not.
I think it's cool that he uses both Laura Dern and Diane Ladd in his movies.
You imagine as a mom having your daughter in Wild at Heart in the same movie, watching the dailies on that? Yikes.
There's been worse. Like the most terrifying aspect of that movie was acting alongside Nicolas Cage and not knowing if he's going to physically bite you.
And Willem Dafoe.
Hey, I overact a lot. I'm probably going to chew the scenery. Keep your hands away from the scenery. Nicolas Cage isn't the best actor. It may be Willem Dafoe.
And that's high praise coming from you. If you're willing to just like be that unhinged when someone says action, there is some...
But that's acting.
Yeah.
Like every stage actor overacts more than Nicolas Cage. Sure. Because you have to. So if you're classically trained, you're like, oh, and you're doing all this shit, and you're like, why are you doing that? It's like the people in the back of the room need to see what's going on. They cannot see my facial expressions. I need to be William Shatner to get to the back of the room. So people that are classically trained for stage acting get to film, and they're like, I'm Shakespeare. And it's like, fucking calm down. You're like, all right. So day one, you're like, okay, cool. I don't need to do that because there's a camera right in my face. I don't need to enunciate to the cheap seats. Got it. But like Nicolas Cage never got that memo, and I love that so much. No one ever told Nicolas Cage, like, look, we have a camera and we have like a long range microphone. You're not playing to people 900 feet away. And he's like, oh, I want to take his face. And they're like, wow. Stop drilling. You've hit oil. No one ever told him from like day one. He was like, oh, I've got a wooden hand. And they're like, well, Cher can't act either. So fuck it. We got a movie.
They're like, Nick, we need you to cry in this scene. And he literally goes, boo-hoo! Boo! Yeah. The bees! My eyes!
Oh, the bees!
He's just great. But
this isn't even a movie. It's a remake of a bad movie.
Doesn't it not make sense that Nick Cage wasn't one of the, like, Lynchian alums, though? Like, he was just a one and done, and I felt like he, more than most people, was just like...
He's too... Well, Dafoe, too. Dafoe didn't never do the Lynch movie either.
One and done.
You know what? You know what happened? he's like, Wild at Heart, this is what you fucking dipshits want. And everyone's like, we don't want this. And he's like, well, I have no fucking clue then.
Yeah, exactly.
It has a 52 on Metascore.com.
Firewalk with Me came out right after that. So it was just like, yeah, that's when he started getting mad. He's like, I don't know what you want. I wanted to do that. I just wanted to go down the line and say each one of Lynch's features in order. And Jason, I just want you to give me the first word that pops in your head. Eraserhead.
Turtle.
The Elephant Man.
Merrick?
Okay.
No. Inhumanity.
Nice. Dune.
Spice.
Blue Velvet.
Soft.
Wild.
I'll fuck anything that moves.
Mommy. Wild at Heart.
Underrated.
Absolutely. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Bob.
Lost Highway.
Confusing.
The Straight Story.
Lawnmower Man.
Mulholland
It's two
Drive.
words, but it was worth it.
It's a name. Mulholland Drive.
Hollywood.
Inland Empire.
Neon.
And that is our David Lynch episode. All those were not right nor wrong. Maybe not the words I would have picked. Maybe they would
Maybe not
be.
the words you would have picked, but guess what? We're both right.
That's right. So if you like the Film Hooligans show, because we like doing it, why don't you go ahead, drop a thumbs up downstairs, share it around. It's a free way to support this show. Go ahead and tell your friends about it. You can follow us on Twitter at film_hooligans. I'm John the Host, which you could find me at John the Host on Twitter. And Jason Eugene Alt, where can everyone find you?
I am Jason E. Alt on the Twitter, and I have a pinned post at the top of my profile that tells you all the other projects I work on around the internet. Thank you so much for tuning in to Film Hooligans.
This episode was solid gold. We'll see you next time.
Peachy Keen, everybody.
Saturday, here in LA, early morning fog and haze clearing to blue skies, golden sunshine, very still right now, around 57 degrees Fahrenheit, 14 Celsius. Should be going up to the mid-70s this afternoon, around 24 Celsius. Sunshine all the way. Have a great day, everyone.